Howdy all. I had not planned on coming to you live, but I just found something and I always get excited when I find stuff. And it's not for lack of, it's kind of for lack of just not having really looked into it before now. But once I started looking into it, I found it within like minutes and I was excited. So I thought I would come on here and share. If you have not seen my previous video, I just uploaded an edited and an edited version and additional content to the written study that I'm doing with the book of Revelation, a study of the revelation of Jesus Christ. So it's available on academia.edu, search name Heather R. And in the previous video, I linked the description. I included, in addition to Revelation 1, which has been out there for months, the letter to the church of Ephesus. So that is now done, and I am moving on to Smyrna. So this is actually a very brief letter. I believe it might even be the briefest letter. It's only a few verses. But one of the things that a lot of people that I have noticed in myself in the past, there's a lot of speculation, because I think that's one of our favorite things to do is speculate when we don't know, because it's easier to, kind of just speculate and entertain could be what ifs, might be type scenarios, rather than just kind of like looking for answers. And so I've been guilty of that myself. But obviously, and really the only part of this letter that I needed to look into that I am not already prepared to write about was that you shall have tribulation 10 days. What is that 10 days? Well, I found the answer, and it's actually kind of like right there for you, just doing some brief research. And so I wanted to take you guys through this, and it's actually in the book of Daniel. I have expressed this sentiment many times, and I will continue to do so, is that the imagery being presented in the book of Revelation is largely explained in the Old Testament. That is not true for all of it. In fact, the letter to the church of Ephesus is really a New Testament-based explanation, and it's all over the New Testament, specifically in the book of Ephesians. The letter to the church of Ephesus is the only church that has a corresponding epistle. So there is significant amounts of clarity that you can gain by actually going to the book of Ephesians and just studying them in parallel, which is what I did. The letter to the church of Smyrna, this is interesting though, because and my Bible has like little reference points that you can use, corresponding verses and stuff. It's the big old King James that my dad used to use. So it's actually very helpful. But the verse in question here comes from Revelation 2:10, and I'm just actually going to read the whole letter because it's only a few verses. And unto the angel of the church of Smyrna write, these things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. First and the last being the Alpha and Omega, that's Jesus, which was dead and is alive, that's also Jesus. I know thy works and tribulation and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. That's going to be fun too. That's going to be a fun thing to explain. But verse 10 is really where I'm focusing on for the purpose of this video. It says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison that ye may be tried. Ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. So the explanation about the first part of that is actually found. There's a lot of explanation that can be found in the Gospels, also in the Old Testament, also too. But fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison that ye may be tried. When you go to the Gospels, Jesus is actually telling his disciples that you're going to go and you're going to be brought in front of, government officials, tried. Don't worry about what you're supposed to say. The Holy Spirit will tell you what to say at that time. So there's actually multiple accounts of that. Matthew 10, my Bible is actually pointing to, but that's only one of the references. So that's kind of, that idea is expressed all over, and basically like, people are going to hate you for my name's sake because of what you have to say, but know that they hated him first. So obviously the student is not greater than the master. If they hated the master, they're going to hate the student too. He talks about that in the book of John, John 15, the vine and the branches. We didn't choose him, he chose us. There's just that kind of sentiment is all over the Gospels specifically. And so I will bring that into focus. But the part that is actually that I'm getting to, ye shall have tribulation 10 days. What is that? What is that 10 days? And I've heard very off the beaten path explanations about this as far as like what that could mean, like the actual tribulation itself is 10 years, not 7 years, and like a whole lot of other things, like what could this mean? But the explanation itself is actually in the book of Daniel. When you look at that whole verse, it says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison that you may be tried. Okay, so let's keep in mind that word tried. You shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. So basically what that says, the gist of what that is saying is that you're going to endure hardship. People are going to put you through things. But no matter what you're put through, the end that you come out the other side of is always going to be better, visibly better, and you will be rewarded for your endurance of faith at the end of it, in front of everyone. It's not just going to be like, oh, I feel good because I got through it. It's no, you're going to come through it, and on the other side, you're going to be rewarded, and everyone's going to see this. The book of Daniel is where this corresponds to, this 10 days, Daniel 1. And so keeping those things in mind, let us read this story. I can find it. There we go. Okay. Verse 3. Actually, I'm just going to start in verse 1, Daniel 1:1. The actual verse that mentions 10 days is verses 13, 14, and 15. So I'm just going to read this account. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar to the house of his God. And he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. This is the Babylonian captivity. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of his eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. The king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. So essentially, he wanted Israel's best brought before him for a specific purpose, and he was to feed them the king's best food and drink, so that they could be well nourished in order to provide the service that the king was seeking. Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he unto Daniel gave the name Belshazzar, unto Hananiah Shadrach, unto Mishael Meshach, and unto Azariah Abednego. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. So the king instructed his guy to make sure that these guys from Israel were fed for this express purpose, the king's meat and the king's wine. And Daniel said, no, I'm not doing it. Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and drink. For why should he see your faces worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. So the king wanted these guys fed well, so that they would appear better than everyone else. And again, for this express purpose, he wanted those who was found no blemish, well-favored, skillful in wisdom, cunning in knowledge, understanding science, and had the ability to stand in the king's palace. So he wanted the best of the best. And so he wanted to feed them what he presumed was the best of the best, so that they would appear to be the best of the best in front of everyone else. But the king's eunuch, who was in charge of dispensing this food and drink to these people, when Daniel said, no, I don't want to do this, he said, well, I'm kind of afraid that the king's going to kill me if I don't make you do this, because then you're going to appear like sickly and weak in front of everyone, which is diametrically opposed to what the king's purpose is for this. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove thy servants. So this goes back to the understanding of the letter to the church of Smyrna. He says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. So in going against the king's wishes and not doing what the king wanted, there was a certainty of not good things happening. But stand your ground and hold your faith and do what within you is right. Because at the end of it, regardless of what might happen to you on earth physically, at the end of this point of trying or proving or this tribulation for 10 days, you're going to come out way better on the end of it and in front of everyone else too. So again, we go back to Revelation 2:10, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison that you may be tried or proved. You shall have tribulation 10 days. But at the end of that, you're going to receive something significantly better. Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days. And let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. So he says, no, don't give us the king's meat and don't give us the king's wine. We don't want it. We're not going to defile ourselves with it. Give us this other stuff instead, and we will prove to you at the end of 10 days that we are better off than we would have been by defiling ourselves. Then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servant. So he says, look at us and look at them at the end of this 10 days, this tribulation, this proving, this trying period. So do what I'm asking you for 10 days, and at the end, compare those people who did what you wanted and compare us who are following the faith and the wishes of our God, and see who's better. So he consented to them in this manner and proved them 10 days. You shall be tried for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Thus Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine, and they should drink, and gave them pulse. As for these four children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all dreams and visions. Yep. And just like that, at the end of that 10 days, by comparison, they were way better off. Then they endured it, and they stuck their course, and they didn't worry about what was going to happen to them. And similarly to God giving them grace and favor and wisdom and skill and understanding and all of that as a result of them doing what he wanted them to. We see the same in the letter to the church of Smyrna. Be thou faithful, and I will give unto thee a crown of life. So the 10 days, thou shalt have tribulation 10 days. The explanation for that story is going to go back to Daniel 1. And sticking the course, enduring, having faith, patience, and at the end of it, you're going to come out better and receive better for staying the course. So if you guys have any questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. I know the have tribulation 10 days has some funky explanations out there, but really just goes back to the story in Daniel 1. So take care. See you guys later.